The best way to think about assessment is as a triangle. Way back in 2001, Pellegrino, Chodowski, and Glaser came up with this idea. And here's how it goes. You start with a construct. Now, a construct is an idea, a concept. It's something that we want to test. For example, creativity, critical thinking, understanding of history, communication skills, endurance, strength. The purpose of assessment is to try to test the construct. Now, you'll notice that a construct cannot be tested directly, but can only be tested indirectly. You can't test creativity, as you can't get inside someone's head and actually see creativity. So what you need is to design a test for creativity. This brings us to the second vertex of the triangle, observation. By observation, we mean a test. If you want to see creativity or critical thinking, or the understanding of history, you have to be able to observe something. Maybe the way someone solves a problem or the way they answer questions about history. If I want to know about someone's endurance, I'll put them in a situation, a testing environment, that brings out their endurance. Now, the observation instrument has to really test what it says it's testing. That's called validity. For example, if I want to know how strong you are, I won't give you a history test. Or if I want to know how creative you are, I'm not going to ask you to run a marathon. That would be invalid. And then there's what we call reliability, which is connected to the way the test is designed. It has to be fair so that different people can take it and the results will not change arbitrarily. If I give a test to 3 different people and the test is different each time, it's not reliable. Finally, there's the interpretation of the observation. In other words, the marking of the test and the conclusions that we draw about the construct. The results can be used to help the learner improve. We call this assessment with a formative purpose, from the Latin formare, meaning to shape, or simply to judge and evaluate the performance. We call that assessment with a summative purpose, from the Latin summa, meaning whole, what has been completed. So, if I want to know how well someone understands history, construct, I could ask them to explain the causes and effects of World War II, for example, observation, and interpret their responses to determine if they have a good, average, or poor understanding of history, interpretation. I could use this information for a number of purposes to help them improve, to reflect on the curriculum. Now, the main problem that we have with assessment is that all 3 vertices. First, we know that the competencies we need to be developing in young people are innovation, complex problem solving, agility, flexibility, resilience, critical thinking, social intelligence, emotional intelligence. So these are the constructs, the things that we should be designing tests to observe. But the tests we're designing for students, especially as they move towards graduation, are still caught up in an industrial model, one that tests knowledge retention, short item responses, and many lower order thinking skills like knowing, memorizing, identifying, labeling, explaining. So we're not really testing the right constructs. This is a problem of curriculum relevance. Second, the tests that we're using are high stakes, meaning they put a huge amount of pressure on students. And we're only really testing academic skills, which means they're narrow. We're forgetting about all the other learning that takes place in sports, outside the classroom, in entrepreneurial activities, in relationships between people. In fact, you could argue that 21st century competences are developed even more in those areas, and they're not assessed. So the observation instrument is not really valid. And lastly, the conclusions that we tend to draw about assessment results in schools are often related to status and image, league tables, the number of top scores there are. Assessment results, like those created through the PISA system, are used to hold education systems accountable, which is a good thing. But if there's too much pressure on schools to get good results, then that's all they focus on. So it becomes a question of getting the best possible scores at any cost, rather than concentrating on learning. Now, those are 2 different things, performance and learning. The way that the observation instrument has been designed conditions the type of learning that we are promoting in schools. To give an example, when we do test higher order thinking skills like critical thinking or analysis, it has to be done quickly, the time that the examination paper lasts, and it therefore favors fast test takers. Now, being able to take a test quickly doesn't necessarily mean that you know a lot or that you're skilled in meaningful 21st century competences. Deep thinking takes time. It's not a race. We also know that academic tests favor children whose parents are educated, who have books at home, and who can afford extra tutors. So it's not really completely fair either, and it perpetuates inequalities. So this is the first lesson on assessment, and it shows us two things. First, make sure that when you're assessing your students, you keep in mind the assessment triangle to understand your assessments are valid, fair, and reliable. Second, let's work towards creating learning environments in every classroom that build the competences that matter. Now, to read more on the problem of assessment, go to chapters 1 to 4 of my open access book, Changing Assessment.